Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzales here in studio, but through Skype with a special guest. And before we go to Wilfred Hahn, I want to remind everybody that Gary and I have started a new podcast where we're going to be discussing current events. We're also going to be interviewing other writers and teachers and scholars about biblical topics, but mainly we'll be covering just the things that are happening in the news. It's relatively easy to find news that is correlating with Scripture. And so if you go to our website, theweekinbibleprophecy.com, you can go there and see we're already on Spotify, we're going to be on Apple, iTunes, and other things. So check it out at theweekinbibleprophecy.com. And today I am talking with Wilfred Hahn, who is an expert in financial analysis, and he has written hundreds of articles that you can find on raptureready.com and other places. And in the book that he wrote an article in a chapter on is the trajectory. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but Wilfred, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
And for those in our audience that might not know about you or your ministry or where they can find information about all that you have written, kind of share with them.
Yeah, I'm glad to do that. Mine is sort of a bifurcated CV, if you will. I have a private career, and then, of course, also ministry. In my private business career, I worked as an analyst, portfolio manager. I ran a couple of big companies. For example, was also a director of research with a major U.S. Global money manager, if you will, and ran the largest money management operation in Canada, global operation in Canada. And that sort of segs for me why we got into ministry. During those years, as I had those executive jobs, I was doing a lot of traveling internationally, sometimes 100 flights a year. And after a while, having been raised as a Christian, the stuff I was reading in the Bible, certainly the prophetic text, seemed to be coming alive in front of my eyes as I was seeing what was going on with globalization firsthand. And so that really accelerated my interests. And in 1996, my wife, Joyce, and we launched Mulberry Press. That was sort of a part-time ministry, if you will. We were weekend warriors, if you will. And we've done that for well over 25 years. We've been associated with Midnight Call Ministries, who we write for as well still. And I've been spoken around the world on various things, be they finance or be they prophecy, that type of thing. So it's been very interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that you bring up in your chapter in the book, Trajectory, is you talk about the ways in which when the Antichrist figure comes along the scene, he's going to have some tremendous understanding of human nature. And when we think about how that connects with economics, there's a lot of parallels in the Bible. We know from Revelation 13 that one of the hallmarks of the Antichrist system is an economic component for sure, as well as political and military and religious. But let's talk about that. How does the nature of humanity, even what we're seeing now, how does the Antichrist kind of leverage that for his purposes?
In a number of ways, and you can document it really well, at least the progression of those tools that have come about globally in the last hundreds of years. The key thing, I think, for everybody to realize is, money seems to be a mundane thing. We all think we're familiar with it. But in terms of the systemic powers of money, it's incredible. I'll just quote something here. There's no more powerful worldwide earthly control mechanism possible of humans than an integrated cashless financial system. Satan's got a problem. He doesn't have omnipotence. He's not. He can't be in two places at one time, whereas God can. And so he's got to come up with some kind of a system where he can control humanity. And so he has to do it through money. There's really no other ways of doing it. You might say, yes, technology is a role, yes, but it's a role, and it facilitates the powers of money and systemic money trends and such. So that's an awareness we really need to have. It has to be through the realm of money in its various forms. And what's been so fascinating for anybody looking at the last couple of hundred years of economic history, financial history, is the rapidity of the various pre-requirements to enabling this financial web internationally that's going to be able to bring it to a time where, as you quoted Revelation 17, 13:17, the Antichrist or whom, well, it's actually the false prophet, have complete control over money of any kind. So it doesn't matter if you're going to do a small transaction in Tuvalu or wherever you want to go in the world, you will not be able to have make a transaction, be that for food, buy a house, or whatever it is. The system will be completely shut down, so to speak. And we're fast on our way to that kind of technological setup already.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me as we look. I mean, the Bible doesn't say specifically that there will be one day a future cashless society, and yet we know that. But yet we're looking at prophecy, and we're seeing a snapshot of this image of the ability for the Antichrist to do what he's going to do in the sense of control through economics, buying and selling. The Bible specifically says that, and so it's reasonable to deduce that really the only way that he could do that is with some sort of digital type system, worldwide system that's being put in place. So comment on that, if you will.
Yeah, and that's certainly coming about. Technology is a great help in building these systems together. I might mention there's a number of things that have to fall into place before we get to that point in time, that being Revelation 13:17, where the entire world can be shut down from any economic transaction. A couple things have to happen. I'll keep it really simple. Really lose yourself in the explanations here, but I've always said there's 4 essential things that needed to happen to get us to that point. First off, we needed a globally integrated and closed financial system that must exist. We're basically there on that particular point. A system of central banking must be endorsed everywhere. It's fascinating. You look back into history and you realize, my goodness, some of these trends they haven't been that very long, but they're very, very decisive. Speaking about central banks, did you know around the year 1900, start of the 20th century, there were only 18 central banks in the world. All of them were European except Japan. And then from that point forward, we're at this point, all of a sudden, here a decade, probably a century and a half, and here we are. We've got over 160 central banks. They all sing from the same sheet. They all have the same philosophies, whether they're Japanese central bank, Chinese central bank. They all speak the same lingo. All the systems are very similar. Policies are different, but that's something that'll be addressed later. That's stage 4, where everybody gets together and agrees to have the same policies, and in fact even give power over to the false Christ. No, the false prophet. Pardon me. So we still have some ways to go in terms of legal statutes, regulatory institutions, and setups, and that sort of thing. And the biggest hang up is sovereignty. Nations don't want to give up their sovereignty. They don't have to. So it takes a few crises to sort of get that thing gelled and to get it moving to a globally unified approach. So the way I look at all the 4 measures that I mentioned, we're about 3/4 there at least, and the last part's going to happen very, very rapidly. It depends how big a crisis is, an interim crisis. That'll motivate change, and we'll get even further along that progression to the point where the entire world can be shut down. In some respects, it's already the case today, isn't it? It's very easy to shut down. Look what happened to Russia. Okay, that wasn't a leak-proof approaches that they took. But nonetheless, you can see how the world can get together and just shut things down. At some point, it'll be the false prophet who does that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a little break here where you can see how you can get our magazine again to find good articles like Wilfred writes and others, keeping track of the current events and the ways in which prophecy is being fulfilled, and the world is going straight away towards seeing these things come to their fruition.
Everything that we're doing at Prophecy Watchers is vital because Bible prophecy is coming to pass right before our eyes. And it has never been more important for believers to understand what the Bible says about the days that we are living in. In case you haven't noticed, the whole world is spinning out of control, but we are not surprised because many of the things taking place were prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago. That's why we want to offer you a very special subscription to our magazine, The Prophecy Watcher, that will keep you on the cutting edge of Bible prophecy. Stay informed on prophetic world events. Follow the nuclear threats from Russia and Iran, China's march to world domination, the likelihood of another global pandemic, the rise of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, war in the Middle East, the UFO phenomenon, and the latest technology preparing the world for the mark of the beast. The Prophecy Watcher magazine features articles from leading prophecy experts like Gary Stearman, Mondo Gonzales, Thomas Ice, Randall Price, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, and many others. With your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, you will receive 12 issues of the magazine in either print or digital format. You will also receive 10 bonus DVDs that feature in-depth teaching on the ancient book of Enoch, heaven and the New Jerusalem, the biblical case for the rapture, a look at how God put the gospel in the stars, what really happened at the Tower of Babel, and Ezekiel's prophecy on the Battle of Gog and Magog. This special offer is available anywhere in the United States with free shipping included. Don't wait. Pick up the phone right now and call the toll-free number on your screen or visit us at prophecywatchers.tv. Stand with us today and help us take the message of Christ's soon return to the whole world.
Well, welcome back, and we are talking with Wilfred Hahn, who is a financial expert and also looks at the way that the Scripture talks about the way in the sense of the end time events that are coming and how it correlates with what we're seeing in our world. And you mentioned the globally integrated financial system, the central banking and national accounting, which I think is true. Number 3, you had the legal statutes and regulatory institutions which oversee the financial activities of capital markets of countries. Let's talk a little bit about that in the sense that there's no doubt if you have legal statutes, that automatically brings in politics and globalism. And how do you think, especially over the past couple of years, it became relatively global? That was a medical crisis, but we also know that no crisis, according to these leaders, is to go to waste. So this medical crisis, however, led to economic situations where I remember I was going into certain places, and if you didn't have certain medical requirements, we're trying not to say it out loud, whether a mask or other things, you were not allowed in certain places to buy or sell. So you have this other component that certainly could come into producing these legal statutes.
On that particular point, I look more at the implications it had for government policy and supportive policy, deficit financing, the rest of it. Untold piles of money were thrown into the system to try to sustain a recovery through economic stimulus. You look at what's done there. It maybe doesn't accelerate the construction of a system, global system that's happening, but that particular point may not have been the biggest inducement. It's the fact that it's continuing to deteriorate the integrity of the structure of financial markets internationally. Now, a lot of people look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, market's got to crash here. How much can nations sustain so much debt and so forth?" That sort of thing just feeds on itself, and policymakers get even more involved and keep it going as long as they can. Our view being that we're not going to see the final financial crash until we get into the tribulation period. In the meantime, Satan's got to make that market look pretty good. He's got to make anything he can do to keep a sense of false prosperity. He's going to do that because that's what holds people in to these kinds of situations. So in this instance, what I look at, I see systems and structure becoming less durable, more vulnerable, and that creates this a challenge for the policymakers. They got to come up with the stuff to get us keep the cart rolling here for as long as we can.
Yeah, we watch and we see the way that. Again, there seemed to be, over the last couple of years, at least as I've been watching for 30 years, that you have this really, I would say, integrated global effort. Yeah, there was the COVID issue was there, but it just shows you the nature of globalism, and how there was an interesting agreement in the sense of people working together to try to solve a problem. And as we know, let's talk about that for a minute, where when the Antichrist comes on the scene, at least it seems in Revelation 6, he comes without a bow, he's on a white horse, and then the second horseman is, you take peace from the earth, which implies that there was peace, because peace now is removed, which then leads into an economic situation, famine, loaf of bread, a day's wage, etc. So, but let's go back to that for a minute, in that when the Antichrist comes on, he's bringing prosperity and promises of grandeur, right, for everybody?
Yeah, that's to keep the delusion going as long as he can. The ultimate coup de grace, the ultimate technique that he uses then, of course, is this ability to shut down financial transactions. At that point, the trap is sprung. It's too late to do anything else. And everybody who's left on earth hasn't been raptured away, has got a decision to make. And that can be forced in this particular case, as it will be, I think. I think that's pretty clear as to whether people are going to give him the honor or not. And again, that's all possible because of the technology that's in place at that point in time.
One of the things that you've written about is, which I think is extremely interesting for sure, is really how the typology of the person of Joseph in the Old Testament seems to give a nice portrait of how the Antichrist himself could come along and be like, hey, I'll follow Joseph's model. Talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, there's some very interesting parallels in the story of in the story of Joseph. I had some reaction to that article because it seemed to portray Joseph as being somewhat of a negative character, which isn't the case. But nonetheless, you can see in his leading of affairs, business affairs, government affairs, over the years that he served the Pharaoh, we really saw a mini globalization take place there. It's there, and the important thing, I think what you're driving at is, even though the Pharaoh gained more and more power because he had the grain to give out and sell, but it came to a point where even somebody like Joseph, people willingly would give him this property just to get grain, just for the benefit of the prosperity. They were willing to even give up their property and so forth. And that's kind of what we're seeing at large here in the world today as well. People would be willing to take on false prosperity as long as they have the sense of it, even though it may be the exact opposite, a trap, in other words.
Yeah, I thought the way that you wrote it was pretty incredible, because you have, again, if you compare where you had 7 years of plenty, and then it didn't take long, as we can see in the story, the biblical story, that it was relatively quick. And that was one of your points, is the timing factor, that when you go from a position of prosperity, which people then are used to it, they get comfortable, they like it, maybe they're living large, they're not saving money because they don't need to, it's not going to be like this forever. And then all of a sudden things start turning, and people want to maintain or retain that level of comfort that they had. And so, what's a little bit of freedom? Big deal.
Yeah, and that's a trade-off that's then made willingly by the world, most of the world, I would guess. And that's again, we get back to the trigger point that the false prophet has, that we read about in Revelation 13:17.
Yeah, if you look at the scenario, if the Antichrist, as he comes along the scene, it seems that he's bringing the prosperity, and then war comes, and then what we know is war, famine, disease, etc., is chaos, and then that leads to, hey, that guy was doing so well, we liked him, he was bringing prosperity to everybody, and now we have all this war and everything, and then he comes along and offers a solution right before the midpoint where the other systems, the structures are in place, and then he coincides it. You're like, why again, he doesn't, at least the way I see it is, like you mentioned in the Joseph story, people were willingly doing this. They were thanking Pharaoh for enslaving them, or Joseph anyway.
And I would imagine it's going to be the same again. I mean, there's an ongoing story, as we live from year to year to year and see the trends at play in the economics and such We see that in front of our eyes. But then again, in that period where whoever's left on the earth, in other words, hasn't been raptured away, is going to have a decision to make.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating the way that you described it. Also, you mentioned in there just how fast a single nation became global, because as we know in the text, there were other nations that became involved in looking to one centralized place, and to be willing to be vassalized, to become vassals to that.
Yeah.
To me, just amazing.
And the Bible does say that the last stages, the 10 kings come onto the world for a very short period of time. It happens very quickly at the end.
Yeah.
We're not talking decades. We're talking a matter of, I don't even know, it would be a matter of years. But it's going to happen very, very quickly. And with the technology that we have today, how everything's hooked up, systemized, and so forth, it can happen very quickly.
Yeah, when you see the character of the Antichrist in Daniel 8, Daniel 11, he comes, he's skilled in intrigue, and then he goes along to honor, in Daniel 11, to honor those with authority, with the ability to rule with them, and which of course is consistent, as you mentioned, with Revelation 17, the 10 kings, that what they're bringing, what I tend to think that the 10 kings are not necessarily government people, but they're the oligarchs, they're the technocrats that you have that offer all the technology and this bait. So the Antichrist is like, yeah, I'll let you rule with me, but I want all your Starlink satellites. I'll let you rule with me, but I want all of your technology here, your artificial intelligence, your quantum computing. I'll let you rule with me if you give me all this technology that helps put it into place.
Yeah, no, you struck an important point there, and that was that the Antichrist uses money to pay off his cohort, and to have them honor him. In other words, as it pertains to the 10 kings, I kind of see them as countries, and that's sort of the last political state of the world before the Antichrist comes on the scene. It's sort of a post-globalism, where a small number who together can wield enough power to overcome any super nation. But it's not a full globalism at that point in time. It's just really powerful who have the means to enforce it on the rest of the world. So I'm not sure who's going to be in that tent, but to me it seems like it's a political group for sure.
Yeah, and there's definitely no doubt the leaning towards like the BRICS coalition, these regional coalitions that are coming together of making, I don't know, again, North American contingent, the BRICS, the South American contingent, which again, no doubt it involves political and governmental associations. But we're going to take a little break here where you can see how you can get the book Trajectory, which includes Wilfred's chapter in there on finances. So take a listen.
The Bible tells us that Jesus will return at a time when most people in the world are not expecting him. The Bible describes his coming as a time when people are eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. In other words, life is relatively normal. But suddenly, the unexpected happens, catching the world by surprise. Millions of Christians are caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, while the world enters a 7-year period of judgment and tribulation. Christians who study Bible prophecy understand that Jesus tells us to watch the signs of the times so that the rapture won't catch us by surprise. After all, we're called the prophecy watchers for a reason. We're watching, and we hope you are too. One of the best ways to watch is to be well informed on prophetic events happening today at lightning speed. Our friend Terry James and a group of 17 other authors and Bible prophecy experts have recently released a book entitled Trajectory, Tracking the Approaching Tribulation Storm. In Trajectory, you're going to read about future wars, pandemics, insane weather, financial collapse, the rise of China, the persecution of Christians, the mass media cover-ups, political intrigue, the rapture, and the future of Israel. All of these events described in the Bible are examined by men like Tom Horn, Jeff Kinley, David Reagan, Tom Hughes, Pete Garcia, Nathan Jones, Bill Salas, Tim Moore, and several others. Trajectory is available for your gift of $25 with shipping included anywhere in the USA. Just call the toll-free number on your screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Help us spread the good news. Jesus is coming soon, and we want to be ready. We've also created a special 3-book package we're calling the Signs of the Times package. It includes Terry's Trajectory book, Steve Miller's book, Foreshadows, 12 mega clues on the soon return of Jesus, and The Disappearing, another great study by Terry James and Pete Garcia on the rapture of the church. When you order the 3-book package, we'll send you a 4th book as a free bonus, Jesus and the End Times by Ron Rhodes, and we'll ship it all to you for free anywhere in the USA, all for your gift of $60 to help support the worldwide television outreach of Prophecy Watchers. Help us keep as many people out of the tribulation as possible. The only thing you can take with you in the rapture is your family and friends, so make sure you don't leave anyone behind. Thanks for supporting God's work here at Prophecy Watchers. Your support is vital to our mission of spreading the gospel to the entire world.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Wilfred Hahn. And Wilfred, share with our audience, if you will, kind of an overview of the chapter that you wrote in the Trajectory book.
Yeah, well, the important thing we wanted to bring out is point number one is the fact that money is being used systemically to build the final, maneuvers of Satan. People have to realize that. We look at money generically, of course, but it is a key necessity for Satan to build a system out of that so that he can control the world. So people really need to know that. And we can document it, how it's happening, in what steps and what's falling another and so forth, and how rapidly. That's really point number one. I would guess the number two, there's a number of other key points in that book, that chapter that I want to bring out, was more or less I'll say the prosperity theology, which, has invaded, if you will, a number of parts of the world, particularly in North America. It's very, very popular. In fact, I sometimes realize that, there's aspects of the prosperity theory that I'm actually structuring my life around. You sort of examine it and say, well, no, that's not correct. We've had a virtual a complete spread of it here in North America, not so much in other countries in the world. And it's interesting to ask the question as to why maybe some poorer nations, why that philosophy doesn't really get any grounding. To them, they're looking at it practically and they think, well, the promises of prosperity theory can't be right. Whereas in the most rich nations, that obviously being the United States, also Canada, it prospers. I've said the term, it's been invasive. It's almost everywhere. And that is unfortunate because it really leans in, or at least enables Satan to some maneuverability, if you will, and some of these aspects come up with people that are so preoccupied with their own sense of wealth and so forth. They're not seeing the bigger picture. They're being blinded. And I explain a little bit more about that in detail in the chapter, so I think that's worth it just there alone.
Yeah. You ask a question about what is the most critical human factors or proclivities contributing to the ongoing development of an end-time money snare, being demographics and ingrained human behavior. Take a minute to discuss that.
Yeah, that's important. And as an economist, I really value that perspective, looking at human action. The thing about humans is that they're not necessarily reliable. They can change their mind. God says he doesn't, but that's the difference between us and God. Mankind changes their opinion on all kinds of things, and they can do it on the flip of a dime. Now, this particular one is all of a sudden the world, after having gone through a population boom in the earlier century, we're now in a period of time where population growth is tanking. In many nations in the world, they have negative growth rate as far as population is concerned. And why is that happening? It's a preference. Mankind has changed their view on something, I'm not saying people need to go have babies. That's not the point of it. But it causes now a drastic deceleration and has major impact on financial markets. It's already to become, they're already coming out to be seen, but we're going to see a lot more downside because that particular thing is happening. You can't have less kids than the adults, right, to be able to sustain those adults as they get older in retirement. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't. And so that kind of leads to a false prosperity as well. You know, people rushing to find solutions for their income needs that they will have when they retire. And that creates another false prosperity. It's a problem, but because people are running and buying all these kinds of investments, mostly being income-oriented investments, they drive up the prices of those assets. So people looking around go, well, this is great. How can this be bad? Prices are going up. Well, it's happening only for a temporary basis because it's a function of the choices they made, which was not to have as many children. So I'm not criticizing people who are having children, but coming from where we did, you know, where we had 3 and 4 children being the average household size, that deceleration is actually a huge negative. And even though it is made to seem as a positive thing from a financial perspective. So that's just one. And there's other human factors that are a function of people changing their mind on things. For example, we could even talk about global warming. All of a sudden, it's a big deal. And I won't jump into it because I like to focus more on the scientific aspect of it. But again, it's an opinion change, a massive opinion change that has swept the world, and that's having major implications. And we haven't seen all the financial implications just yet.
Well, what do you know, for the average Christian believer that loves God watching this, what advice do you give them as it relates as a financial planner, but also from the spiritual perspective? What should they be watching and listening, and what's maybe an actionable thing that they could do to stay ahead of the game, or just to be seeking the Lord in all this?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a special document just for that answer, just for that question. It goes into 13 points as to what's a good way for Christians to approach things. Mm-hmm. We obviously don't have the time to go through all 13 points here, but the number one is what are your motivations? What's the motivations in your heart? First, you got to get that cleared up. And from that point on, you can get into the practicalities of building a financial portfolio and such. And the last of the 13 points, we're happy to make this available. The last of them is, the point number 13 is, if at all possible, make sure you're on good terms with your kids, because you may need them someday.
Yeah.
The pension systems aren't going to be sustainable long term, not the way they're being run right now. And so, you know, future generations, my generation, needs to worry about their own retirement money. I shouldn't use the word worry, but you should structure it, should plan.
Yeah,
that's
plan.
a good word.
That's a good word. Well, Wilfred, it's been great talking to you today, and again, I encourage people to go to your website. We'll have that in the description for people to see and take a look at your articles that you've written, which again can be found on Rapture Ready and other places. But for those watching, again, we're seeing the end time structures of this economic component coming to be. We know it's on its way, and we're seeing it already in many stages. Is it going to be here tomorrow? Not necessarily, but nevertheless, the rapture is prior to all this, and so much of that can be implemented when the church is gone. So appreciate you watching this week. Yep. Always keep your eyes and mind on Jesus Christ and the gospel. That's the only way that we can be saved. And so we'll see you next time.